Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans, and Financial Times columnist and provost at King's College, Cambridge, Gillian Tett. All right, Christine, I'll begin with you. No change from the Fed.
Yeah, and just looking through what the Fed has to say here, unchanged at 4.25% to 4.5%, as you pointed out, but a higher chance of rising inflation and rising unemployment. The Fed didn't use the word stagflation, but that's what that means when you have inflation rising and unemployment rising.
That's basically the worst case scenario.
That's bad, right? So there's a higher chance of rising inflation and rising unemployment, and a further increase in uncertainty to the outlook. What does that mean? They don't know what the damage and pain will be in the end of the president's trade war. So that is one reason why they don't really have much move to maneuver here. They're pointing out also that the economy started from a pretty solid pace. So really you had a solid backdrop to the economy until about the beginning of April. And then now, since then, we have seen all of this disruption from the president's trade war. So the Fed here, TBD. I will say at 2:30 in about 27 minutes, the Fed chief is going to be speaking. So that's when reporters will really be able to ask him more about the trade war. And then, of course, we'll wait to see if the president expresses any displeasure or pressure on the Fed for not lowering rates.
I've got quite a bit of sound that I want to play, so bear with me. First, I'm going to start with Scott Bessent talking about Donald Trump's game theory on these trade deals. This was on Fox News. Let's play it.
It's called, in game theory, it's called strategic uncertainty, what you're talking about. Nobody does it better than President Trump, and it can be unsettling for the markets. But why are they unsettled? Because they have a lack of information. President Trump has asymmetric information for what he's willing to do. We don't disclose it. And again, with President Trump, that the strategic uncertainty will make sure that we get the best deal possible. That's what's happening with the trading partners who are coming to us.
Is that really what's happening, Vaughn? Is it an intention to be strategically uncertain and to make everybody kind of confused right now? Markets certainly don't like confusion. And I just get the sense that the administration, everybody around Donald Trump keeps reacting to whatever he's saying in the moment. Because yesterday he's talking about how he doesn't want a deal, but then you have Bessent saying, no, there are deals coming. You have Navarro saying 90 deals in 90 days. What is happening? Bring me into the room.
It appears that it's the best strategy that the cabinet has to explain the ever-changing mindset of the president himself. Scott Bessent is somebody who has been, I think, a very poised spokesperson on behalf of the president, but poised to the extent that he can explain what is happening, right? He just last night acknowledged that these talks that are about to proceed with China are not so much about negotiating a great deal, but negotiating a de-escalation after it was his boss, the president, who was the one that escalated this 3 months ago in the first place and ultimately created what amounts to an effective embargo between China and the United States. And so from Scott Bessent's point of view here, he has working for somebody who is going on the attack against Jerome Powell, calling him a major loser, calling him a stiff, repeatedly denigrating the work of the Fed and Fed Chair Jerome Powell, somebody who he tapped to be in this position in the first place, but saying that the central bank is continuously behind and that this is a moment here where Bessent and others in the cabinet understand that the president of the United States is the one that has sent the markets into such volatility. And he, on the other hand, is trying to create some certainty by acknowledging that there is strategic uncertainty, is the way that he has described it.
The first bit of actually promising news on a trade deal that I've seen was reported, Gillian, out of the Financial Times. And this is the UK coming close to a deal. What are the contours of that?
Well, absolutely. There's great hope in London that they can indeed be the first people to cut a trade deal. And certainly from the point of view of the Trump team, it would be pretty useful to have that because they need to have something, anything to show markets to indicate that they do intend to make progress. There was some chatter around cutting a deal with India. That may come yet. But the UK deal, which has been under discussion for some time, would essentially see sectors like autos and steel to get some relief from the tariffs. And as a quid pro quo, the UK would probably give the US some kind of breaks on things like digital services taxes. Now, the thing to stress about UK-US trade is that actually not only is the trade relatively well balanced if you look at the goods side of things, but much of it's about services, which up until now, it seems that Trump doesn't care very much about. So in some ways, it's a lot easier to negotiate a deal with the UK than with many other countries.
Let me talk to you about one of the things that keeps coming up, and this is the idea that Americans will have less options for more money. People have likened it to Donald Trump's Marie Antoinette moment, saying girls will get $2 instead of 30, and they'll have to pay more for them, $2 more. Here's Scott Bessent on Fox News. I told you we had a lot of Scott Bessent talking about what it's going to mean, or how parents can talk to their daughters about how they're getting less at Christmas time.
This reporter behind me was quite snarky the other day when President Trump talked about the girl having two dolls. And he said, well, what? President didn't take the question, but he said, what would you tell that girl? And I said, I would tell that young girl that you will have a better life than your parents, that you and your family, thanks to President Trump, can now be confident again that you will have a better life than your parents, which working class Americans had abandoned that idea. Your family will own a home. You will be able to advance. You will have a good education. You will have economic freedom. That's what we are advancing.
Christine?
Okay, so people are so upset about cost of living, about a home, about a car loan, about all of these other things. And what we're hearing from the administration is about dolls, when the real problem here in the near term is the potential that the people who make stuff in this country, manufacturers who import parts and small business owners who import stuff for their shelves, they are completely disrupted at the moment. And so we're talking about jobs, we're talking about factory jobs, so they're playing this out. I don't know how many years or decades they're talking about for this change, but the American people aren't feeling that right now and aren't sure where we're going.
They're not staging it. I mean, it's not like there's going to be a transition to that. In 90 days, we're going to do this. In 180 days, we're going to do this. By 2 years, we want this to happen. We're going to put these sorts of tariffs on to encourage companies to make plans to move and to get things ready.
And it was a public distaste for the transition from COVID to the post-COVID economy. That's why they elected Donald Trump. And now he's talking about another transition that I don't know that many people thought was coming.
And one that came on just as suddenly as COVID did. It's not just the dolls line. It's what is behind the dolls line, Jillian, that I think is worth talking about. And to get there, I want to play another soundbite. This is Donald Trump describing how he envisions seeing himself on top of the American economy.
I could announce 50 to 100 deals right now because, I'm the shopkeeper and I keep the store. And, I know what countries are looking for and I know what we're looking for. And I can just set those terms and they can go shopping or they don't have to go shopping because everybody wants to shop here.
So Donald Trump sees himself as a shopkeeper. In the Dispatch today, Kevin D. Williamson, conservative writer, goes pretty hard at Donald Trump and is calling him a socialist. And he says, what I love here is socialism is a word that means something, regardless of what you might see thrown around on social media or attacks, whatever. Socialism has a definition. And he likened what Donald Trump's saying about being a shopkeeper to what Lenin said about his ideal society in Russia, one big factory. Donald Trump as a socialist, Jillian, what do you make of that?
Well, I think right now it's fascinating. I originally trained as a cultural anthropologist, so I'm very interested in cultural memes. And on the one hand, when you go back to the dolls issue, what we've got is a complete inversion culturally from what previous presidents have done, which is have a president tell American voters they have to suck up pain, short-term pain for long-term gain. And oddly enough, that's very Chinese, because the Chinese have been talking for a long time about the need to eat bitterness when there are problems for the national good. And that's basically what Donald Trump is telling Americans now. And if it comes to a contest about which country can eat more bitterness, I'm not sure I'd bet on America right now. But the other thing is, when he talks about how he wants to wield power, Donald Trump is talking more like King Henry VIII in the Tudor royal court or Louis XIV in Versailles, where he sees himself as basically being the ultimate puppet master who can pull all the strings. And the thing that's really interesting is that he regards economics as almost being a derivative of politics. Politics and power have primacy, and economic policy making comes second. And that's completely opposite to how neoliberal economics, a kind of Reaganism that we've lived with for the last few decades, saw the world, because for them, it was all about free market and economic flows, and politics was almost secondary. So it's absolutely fascinating, not just from an economic perspective, but also from a cultural perspective, what's going on right now.
It does feel like you could be talking about a President Bernie Sanders here, Jillian.
Absolutely. And, you know, it was not on my dance card we'd end up in this situation at all a couple of years ago. But if you pull apart what Donald Trump is talking about, it's quasi-industrial policy. It's a government setting directions. He's talking about, frankly, redistribution. It's Main Street's turn, not Wall Street's turn. That's one of the great mantras coming out from Scott Bessent. You've even got people talking about potentially raising taxes. You know, Steve Bannon talking about raising taxes on the rich. So it's a jumble of policies, which in many ways is closer to Bernie Sanders. And what combines all of them is populism.
But is it going to Main Street? Is this money that Donald Trump is promising, the external revenue service that tariffs are going to create, is that going to put more money into Main Street's pocket, into the average American's pocket?
I mean, I guess what they're saying is that, well, I mean, Main Street's going to pay for at least some share of these tariffs. And if you're talking about tariffs funding the government instead of corporate profits, I guess, or corporate profits as much, that means Main Street may benefit, but Main Street is paying for it and paying a bigger share of it. It's a complete reordering of how the economy works.